How's it going, boys and girls? In this video, we're going to talk about scripting. Specifically, we're going to replicate the GUI screen in Arsenal so it will take you to the game when you press play. And the other buttons don't work, by the way. But with that, let's get started. So the first thing we need to do is to set up a scene, preferably a place where you want the intro screen to be and a scene where the game actually happens. Now, I already have something in place because I don't want to get bogged down in this video putting parts together. The most important part is the positions of the intro screen. I'm just going to replicate Arsenal a bit with a character standing on the right, with the screen GUI on the left, and the camera will be pointing straight at this scene like this, and this will be the scene the player will see when they first enter the game. The second thing we need is to create an in-game scene where all the actions happen, which basically just a duplicate of my main scene, except I changed the cloud colors to yellow so I know what is what. I also added a spawn point. You probably can't see it, but it's right there. The next thing we need to do is to figure out how we want the camera to be positioned and where is it going to appear. This is where the magic is happening. As before, I want my camera to position to look something like this, like the Arsenal splash screen. When the player enters, this is what it will look like. First, we need to figure out what this position is. So when we do script the camera, we know exactly where to put it. So what you're going to do is to move yourself in position where you want the camera to be. You can just do this by roaming around with your camera in the workspace right now. And here's the important part. Once you find your happy camera position, don't move from this position because we need to keep track of this coordinate to finish the setup. Next, we need to create a new part in workspace. This part is going to take the place of our imaginary camera position, and I'm going to call it target camera. You guys can call it whatever you want. Just make sure you know how to reference it again later on. Make sure to set the part anchor to true, can collide off, and make the part look like a cube. And this will be our temporary camera position that is right there, which is clearly in the wrong position. So to fix this, we're going to take the camera's position and we're going to paste it into our target camera. Now to do this, you are going to go into workspace, camera. In the properties window, you just take the position of the camera and paste it into the target camera. So as you can see, when I paste the position into our target camera, nothing happened except your target camera just disappeared. But if you move out of the way, you can see the part now took place of your camera, which is this gray cube here. And then finally, we need to create a focal point where the camera can focus on. If we don't have this, the camera will simply look at a weird angle, and that is not what you want. So we're going to create a second part. You want to position it right in front of the camera. Now, you don't need to be exact in this part because you will need to tweak it afterwards to get the ideal place to focus. But for now, if you just place the cube right in front of the camera, then everything is good. And finally, the third thing we need to set up is the screen GUI, which is very basic. I just put a screen GUI in starter GUI, I put a frame in it, and 3 buttons. Customize it however way you want. I just want to leave this as basic as possible for this tutorial. If you don't know how to do this, well, I'm just going to have to make another tutorial for it later on. But for now, this is all the setup we need. So now we can get to the fun part, scripting. So we're going to need to script 3 things. Local script, which is going to be on the client side, which is going to control the camera. The second thing that we need to script is the screen GUI. The third script that we need to script is the server script, which is responsible for teleporting the player to the in-game scene. So for the first script, we're going to create a local script in starter player script and rename it to main. This is just my personal preference. You can rename it anything that you want, of course. In the script, we're going to tell Roblox to reposition the camera when the character is loaded into the game. So this is how we're going to do it. So the first thing we need is we need the player service. And the second thing that we need to instruct the local script when the character is added, we're going to do something with that. Inside of character added, I want to grab the reference to the camera, which is workspace current camera. And then after that, I want to grab the target camera, which I've created for the position of the camera. And I also want to grab the position of the focal point So when we have these three things, we can now move the camera in place. So the first thing I need to do, I need to set the camera type to scriptable, because by default, you cannot move the camera. The camera will always follow your character around, and this is the default setting. So we want to override this behavior with a camera type called scriptable. This way we can tell the camera to reposition itself any way that we want. So to continue, we're going to first set the camera C-frame to the target C-frame. What this does is that it's going to set the C-frame of the camera to be in the same position as the target camera. So in other words, they're going to be overlapping each other. The second thing that we need to do is we're going to make sure that the orientation of the camera is going to be looking at the focal point that we have created. So to do that, we're going to need this set of code right here. We're going to create a new C-frame, and we're going to set the current camera position to look at the focal point and to make sure that it is still upright when the rotation finally happened. And once you have these two lines of code in place, you are done. So now if you test the game now, your camera should look awkward towards the focal point, which probably not what you want, because at the very early stage on, we created the focal point just right in front of the camera, but we didn't take the time to adjust the focal point to make it look exactly the way you want. The reason why we didn't do it before is because, well, we don't know how the camera is going to orientate and how it's going to look. So now that the camera is pointing at the focal point, you can now go back into the workspace and move the focal point into a position where you want. You might want to do this 3 or 4 times to get the right angle that you want. And once you are happy with the focal point and its position, you should have look something very similar to what Arsenal's GUI screen look like. Although your camera is now in a new position, your character can still move around when the camera is elsewhere. So as you can see, I'm moving around the main screen right now. And you can see that I can come up to the front of the screen and I can jump around anytime. The last thing you want is you want the character to just kind of jump off the map and just like kill themselves. So to prevent any movement, you want to set the humanoid walk speed of that character to 0, so the player won't be able to move. But they can still jump though. So now the first part of the battle is finished. You got the GUI screen, you position it the way that you want. It looks legit. The only thing that they need to do now is to select one of the 3 options. You either play the game, or you go to setting, or you look at the credits. But for this particular purpose, we only want to know what the play button does. So we're going to create a local script inside of the screen GUI, which we just created, right under the start button. And I called it on click. In the script, we're going to do 4 things. The first thing we're going to do is we're going to release the camera so it will look at the player again. The second thing we're going to do is to make the character walk again. The third thing is to remove the screen GUI. And then the fourth thing is to teleport the player to the game. Inside the script, we need 2 services. One is the players. The second one is replicated storage. We need the player service because we want to set the character walk speed again. For the replicated storage, we want to store a remote event in there, which later on we're going to be needing it if we want to teleport the player into the game. The next line of code, I want to be able to reference the screen GUI, because when we press play, we want to be able to turn the screen GUI off. And then we also need a reference to the button so that we can set up the mouse button click. The last thing that we need to do is to create a remote event. So right now we don't have a remote event. So we're going to create one right inside of replicated storage. I call it teleport to game. You can call it whatever you want. And inside of this mouse button event, we're going to take the camera, we're going to reset it by taking the reference of camera, workspace, current camera, and then we're going to set the camera type to custom again. And this is the only thing you need to reset the camera so that it will move along with your character again. The second thing that we need to do is to grab the humanoid from the character itself so that we can set the walk speed back to its default setting, which is 16. The third thing that we need to do is to turn off the screen GUI once the button is clicked. And the fourth thing that we need to do is to invoke the fire server for the remote event, teleport my character to the in-game spawn point. And that's all we need for the click event. Now, if you play the game now and press play, the camera will now snap back to your character and you can walk again. But we're still not done yet. The last thing we need to do is to teleport the player to the game. which can only be done on the server. So we're going to create a script inside of server script service, and I call it main again. In this script, we're only going to respond to the remote event from the client. So I'm going to grab replicated storage, and then I'm going to reference remote event that I just created. And then we're going to grab the spawn point that is in the game. Once we have these referenced, we can now set up the on-server event for the remote event. And inside this remote event, we are going to take the character's humanoid root part and set its C-frame to the spawn point C-frame. And this is all we need to complete the transition from the GUI to the game. When we test out the game again, you can see the full sequence being played out now. First, you're being spawned into the main screen where the camera is locked, looking in one direction with the screen GUI to the side. When you press play, you are being teleported to the game as if you just spawned there. And that's it. This is as simple as it gets. So I hope this all helps you guys out. If you have any other scripting requests, please let me know in the comments below. And of course, like and subscribe if you haven't. See you next time.